Hello and welcome to the weekly process. I am Donna Bottomley, therapist, musician, and writer. And the weekly process is 15 minutes, give or take, where we take a moment to use expressive writing and some music to offload whatever is on our minds from the week that has just gone, so that we can hopefully get a bit better sleep on a Sunday night and not have those things running through the back of your mind. The aim is to sort of get them out on paper and kind of reflect on what is actually annoying you about that, or bugging you about that, or why it might be on your mind. Or it's also about just offloading the week that's just gone if there isn't anything specific. Because if you've had a busy week, you can use the page to just dump how you feel about the week. And sometimes through that, something can come up that you want to take a bit further in your writing and you want to write about a bit more to move forward with that issue a little bit. And also, I hope that this process will do for you what it nearly always does for me, which is make me feel a little bit clearer about the week that is to come. And you can also use the latter half of the session to plan your week. And you can tie that to what's come up and kind of plan what you would do regarding that issue, or use it for planning the week to come. So in the session today, I wanted to also introduce to you something called the feeling wheel. I've sent this to everybody that subscribes to the newsletter that I send out on Sunday, so you'll already have it if you are a subscriber. But if you don't have it, I've put a link in the description to the file that you can download from my website. And if you want to sign up to the newsletter, I send this every Sunday. You can do that, and there is a link to that at the bottom of my website. In the footer of my website, actually, you can sign up there. So get your pen and paper ready, and if you want to, you can type, but preferably try and handwrite. And first, what I want to do is show you the feeling wheel, because the reason I wanted to introduce it to you today is because it's a way of plotting how you feel. And you can use that to plot how you feel before you do the writing, and then plot how you feel afterwards. Sometimes there might be a change. There may not be, but sometimes there might be. And you can also use this at other times as well. So the feeling wheel is, I've adapted it from something called the Affective Circumplex. Bit of a long word there, but there was a piece of research done by Posner et al., and they called it the Affective Circumplex. They did two dimensions to this. They looked at how activated our nervous systems are at any one moment, and where you would plot that from feeling flat and nothing at all, really calm, to really hyper, really activated. So they've got flat to, well, they don't call it flat, they call it activated and deactivated. And I've sort of called it sort of hyper and hyperactivated and kind of flat deactivated. And then left to right, they call the dimension there pleasant to unpleasant, or you can go unpleasant to pleasant, depends on how you plot it. So you get a sense of how activated you are and whether that feeling is pleasant or unpleasant. And you can plot roughly where you are in these kind of quadrants. So I've done a little video to show you how I draw that out. Let me just play that for you now, actually, and then you can see how I actually do it. So you get your circle, and then you just dissect the circle. So you've got quadrants, but at the top you've got activated, how activated your nervous system is. And then deactivated or flat. I've called it hyper and flat because that just kind of makes sense to me, but use whatever words work for you. And then from pleasant to unpleasant, or you could put it pleasant to unpleasant. So see what works for you, but I've put pleasant to unpleasant. And then what I do is I tend to just sort of plot where I am. But what you can also do is you can add in some words for what these feelings feel like. So on the I did a PDF actually of this. I did a booklet. So on the booklet that I sent to people on the newsletter, which is on my website, donnabottomley.com/feeling-wheel. What I've done is I've placed words inside the quadrant. So flat and unpleasant would be depressed, and hyper pleasant might be excited, hyper and unpleasant might be nervous, panicked, really anxious. So you can actually put words inside the wheel for kind of what these feelings feel like, and that's what I've put in the booklet if you wanted to download that. But the main sort of thing for today is just to get you to sort of plot where you would put yourself from activated to deactivated, hyper or flat, right? Pleasant to unpleasant. So this was just an example that I did for one of my writing sessions. And the number one was I plotted how I felt before, and number two was how I felt afterwards. And so that's an example of how I did it. So if you just draw yourself a circle now with the quadrants, and then just plot where you feel you are right now between hyper and flat, pleasant or unpleasant. Where would you put yourself now before we do the writing? And maybe put a number one for where that is. So as we go into the first writing session, this session is going to be 7 minutes. I've got you a timer, so you don't have to set a timer if you don't want to. You can just rely on what is on the screen. I've broken the timer down into 5 minutes and then 2 minutes, so you've got a sense of when the sort of countdown is to the final sort of 2 minutes. So grab your pen and paper, and really it's just writing about whatever is present for you at the moment that you are just wrestling with, or it's at the back of your mind. Any worries that you've got from the week that has just gone, or worries about tomorrow, actually, if you've got any of those that are present for you now, that might keep you awake tonight because you're thinking about them, you can use it for that as well. If anything traumatic happened to you over the past week, a reminder here that actually you don't want to overwhelm your brain by trying to process a traumatic event too soon. So the best advice there, if something really big and traumatic happened for you, is to write about how you feel right now, maybe what would comfort and soothe you going into the next week. But there's no pressure to process a traumatic event right now, and the research says that you don't really want to overwhelm your brain by trying to do that too soon. So if you're ready, grab your pen and your paper, and we'll go into the first writing session for 7 minutes. This is our offload. All right, let's go. Hello, welcome back. How did you find that? It's always really interesting to me just to know how this first exercise is for you and how it differs or might differ from the second one. Because I think that what I've seen is that people tend to use the exercises slightly differently. So, whilst broadly speaking, I've got it set as an offload for 7 minutes and a process for 7 minutes. Sometimes you might find that you are offloading and processing within the first 7 minutes, and then you use the second 7 minutes for another topic. So you use this however works for you. And don't worry if you find that you're processing in that first 7 minutes. Just means you can use the next session for either another topic or actually to go into planning about that thing that you were processing in the first session, or to go a bit deeper with that one. So let's just pause. Let's just take a moment before we get into the processing or whatever you are going to write about in your next session, and however you're going to write about that. So let's just pause, take a big breath in, hold it and let it out like a big sigh. Another big breath in, hold it briefly and then let it out like a big sigh. And one more of those. Take a big breath in, hold it and let it out like a big sigh. A sigh can be quite releasing for the nervous system. So now as we've done that and let out that big sigh, just double check that you're not clenching anywhere. Toes, fingers, calves, shoulders, or anywhere else. Just shake it out if you are. So now, as we go into the second session, the processing part of the writing session, use the thing that came up for you in the first session if you want to, and then go deeper with that. So reflecting on what came up, thoughts and feelings that came up for you, reflections on any patterns that you noticed. Has this happened before? What might you want to do if it happened again? What's the kind of story here? Is there a beginning, middle, and end? And how might you want this to end? If you're thinking about something that has happened that you might have been ruminating over, it might be something you can't get an answer to the question on. You can't close it, you can't get closure. But what you can do is you can tell yourself what you want to do about it right now until you get more information, so that you can get a sense of your own closure on it for right now. And also if there's any actions that you need to take that maybe you're not taking because it's unclear what the action is, or you might feel a bit anxious about taking that action. So sometimes we can be thinking something at the back of our minds, and it can become something we ruminate over because we can't take an action. So that's not always the case, but just ask yourself, is there an action that I'm not taking here because it's hard, because it makes me anxious, or because I'm not quite clear on what I need to do? If that's the case, just try and have a think through what the actions could be. What next steps could you take? So let's go into this next processing session. And if you want to start writing about something else, something different from the first session, from the past week, or that's present for you at the moment, or something you're worried about for the week to come, that's all right. So grab your pen and paper. I will set the timer so you don't have to, but if you want to set a timer for 7 minutes, that's absolutely fine. But as with before, I've got the time 7 minutes split into 5 minutes and 2 minutes. So you've got a sense of what the countdown is. So let's go. Let's process. Hello, welcome back. And how was that second writing session for you? Did you find that you moved yourself forward a little bit with the issue that you wrote about earlier, or the second issue if you wrote about something else? Um, did you find that there were any insights that came out from writing about the issue a little bit more deeply? It would be really interesting to know how you found that exercise. Or session, not exercise. That's not a very good word, is it, for it, really? Writing exercise. The writing session. How did you find it? So, what I thought I would do, and I thought you might find helpful as well, is because we used the feeling wheel at the beginning and plotted roughly where we were on it. I thought we could go back to that feeling wheel and just plot how we feel at the moment. Let me just get my page back up. So yeah, okay. So let me just bring up the diagram of that again so you can get a sense of what it was if you didn't draw your own one, or if you did, and hopefully you did, you can just plot now using the number 2 where you feel you are. And if you did it the same way that I did mine, you've got hyper at the top, flat at the bottom, pleasant on the left, unpleasant on the right. So at the beginning, the number 1 here is in between sort of flat and unpleasant, so not feeling very motivated, a little bit stuck with an issue. I remember how I felt when I did that one, and then afterwards felt a little bit more motivated, so there's a little bit more activation, and it felt a bit more pleasant because after writing about it, I definitely knew what I needed to do about that issue. It moved me forward. So where would you plot yourself now on your feeling wheel? Put a number 2 there. And if you want to put that emotion into words too, you can. But did it either change your activation level or change the quality of how you felt? Was there any change? It doesn't have to be a change, obviously, but was there any change in how you felt before writing about what you wrote about and now? It'd be really interesting to know. So if you wanted to let me know, that would be great. So if you felt like you didn't fully finish and you want to use another 7 minutes to finish and to maybe plan what you want to do on that issue that came up for you, then use another 7 minutes to do that. But if not, that's your weekly process finished with for this week. And I'm going to stick around for another few minutes if you want to ask me any questions about any of this. We'll have a chat about any of this. I'm going to be here. But if not, have a great week and I will see you next Sunday. Bye for now. I just want to say actually to the people who sent me some messages last week that I had a few technical issues, so I'm sorry that I didn't get back to you on those messages, but hopefully this week all is looking well, so I can actually answer you this week. Oh, thanks, Janaki. I hope I've said your name wrong, right, Janaki. Hopefully I've said your name right, but thank you for that, and I hope you found it helpful. It's a really interesting, I suppose exercise is a good word for it, isn't it, really? But I just find that it moves me forward on an issue when I write about it. And it's fascinating how I'm a therapist, okay? So you would think that I would know exactly how I feel about everything, but I don't, because of the way the brain works, right? So we can only be aware of a certain amount of things at any one time. It's called the narrow band of awareness. And if we didn't have that, we'd be so overwhelmed that we wouldn't function very well. But in practice, what that means is there are a lot of things that we're not fully aware of. And so you can either talk about things to your friends or other people, or you can write about, or you can play music or use your own creative way of offloading and taking stock, right? Pausing to take stock of how you feel of something. We've all got our own ways, but as I've found out, it's actually really important because through writing, I get to really unpack an issue and know how I feel about it. And I often don't know before I write, but it always moves me forward in some way. So I'm really grateful uh, for this exercise. Oh, thanks, Janaki. I'm really glad that you found it useful. Um, Also, some emotions and feelings about situations after some time has passed and we reflect on it later. Absolutely. Absolutely. It is fascinating, isn't it? Emotions are one of those things that we all know, but do you know what? Science hasn't settled on one explanation of what emotions are because we all know what they are, but actually trying to pin down exactly what that is for science is really complicated. And although you could say nobody's found a place in the brain where emotions sit, because it doesn't seem like they sit in one place, um, they're there, right? And you can be writing about something that happened years ago and not really be aware of how you feel about that thing. But as you bring it up into consciousness, the emotions are there. And there's debate about whether they were there or whether we construct them in the moment. But the fact is, our experience is that we are feeling something. Um, and there's a lot of reasons why it's very helpful to put that into words. There's a researcher called Matthew Lieberman. If you have a look at his research into emotion labeling, he's found that it's really helpful for us to put how we feel into words, and it can help us with that feeling by putting it into words. And they change over time. They absolutely do, don't they? They do. They change over time. And in therapy, particularly EMDR therapy, I practice EMDR therapy, and that's that statement that you've made there, they change over time, is really, really relevant for that. Because with traumatic experiences, what you can find is that at first it's terrifying to go there with a traumatic memory. But with trauma focused therapy, over time you can really process that emotion to the place where you know it's there, you know how you feel about it, but it's not so overwhelming. The quality of the emotion changes. Emotions are fascinating, aren't they? They really are. But yeah, they do change over time, don't they? And even while writing about them, I find, putting it into words, it really kind of changes, sometimes reduces the intensity of them. There's so much to say there about the intensity of emotions as well. In fact, I think that could be a topic for one of these sessions, actually, is looking at one of the theories of emotions and maybe going a bit deeper about emotions, and one of the ways that we can use to kind of manage them. So we've used the feelings wheel today to plot how you feel. But there's really helpful theories, one of them based on what's called interoception, which is noticing the sensations of how we feel and kind of working with those sensations to reduce the intensity of an emotion. There's lots of things, isn't there, to say about emotion, but if you have any topics related to that, or expressive writing, or processing, offloading, emotions, mental health, if you want me to talk about any of those topics or go a bit deeper about any of those topics, just please feel free to let me know, because I'd be happy to bring it up in these sessions. But yeah, so hopefully that helped, and you feel like you move forward a little bit on an issue today. And one of the ways we can use this is is by hopefully helping ourselves with that Sunday feeling, that Sunday night feeling. And so my hope for you, my wish for you, is that you're going into Monday feeling a little bit clearer about an issue, about one issue at least. So I hope that you are facing Monday a little bit clearer than before, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. And hopefully, I'll see you next Sunday for another weekly process. So take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Bye.